Hello, and welcome back to my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Sorry this one's a bit late. Starting us off with no spoilers, this is a very good film. In my opinion, this is the best Marvel film that we have had since Infinity War, and it was truly amazing from start to finish. Now, compared to the other two Guardian films, how does it stack up? Well, I would say that it is the least well written strictly from a narrative standpoint. And what I mean by this is that the film can be a bit messy at times, and the Guardians jump from location to location quite a lot. But I do want to stress this does not mean that it is a bad film. Now, in terms of heart, this is the best of the three Guardian films. This film is incredibly emotional, and I was just straight up crying in the theater. The movie is very rocket focused, and I think the Rocket backstory was executed wonderfully. All of the Guardians themselves actually are executed wonderfully in this film. All of the actors did a fantastic job, and the antagonist was another really strong point in this film. He is an extremely hateable individual. There is no sympathy with him, and I think that is a really good thing. This film also does a good job with handling very dark themes, but also very enjoyable comedy at the same time. Overall, this was a very solid film with a few hiccups here and there, such as individuals like Adam Warlock and how he's represented in the film. But I'm honestly going to give this an 8 out of 10, and I would definitely recommend anyone to go see it, especially if you're a massive Guardians fans. Now, for more of a spoiler section, I want to start off with Rocket. The Rocket flashback was super heartfelt, and I knew immediately once we met these characters, just in my head, I knew they were gonna die, but it still hurt really bad. And I especially loved Floor in this film. Lila and Teefs were also really good. And I love the scene where Lila is dabbing the blood off Rocket's head when they first meet. That was super emotional. Then when Rocket was making the key card and they were trying to escape, I was trying really hard not to cry because I knew it was coming. I knew there was no way they were going to safely make it out. But then when everyone was killed, I just couldn't hold it back anymore. The whole flashback was executed wonderfully. It was incredibly emotional and super well done. The climax of this film was also another thing that I thought was handled very well. The hallway scene was fantastic, as I'm sure a lot of you have heard. The action was done incredibly, as well as the camera moving throughout the whole scene. And also in the climax, Rocket saving the animals was another just beautiful scene. Rocket facing off against the High Evolutionary was fantastic, and even though Rocket saying his own name was a little bit corny, I was still all there for it, and I thought it was amazing. However, I do feel like the Guardians going against the High Evolutionary was just a little bit too short of a fight. We saw him use his gravity suit against Adam Warlock, and I think that would have made for a really engaging final battle with all of the Guardians going up against him. However, I can't deny they were really jumping him at the end there, and it was just fantastic to see him take so many blows consecutively. Also, the choice not to kill him did kind of make sense, but he more than likely died either in the vacuum of space or in the exploding ship, which is a far worse death than just being shot. Another really good action scene, and a duo that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, was Star Lord and Groot. The scene where Star Lord is speaking with the High Evolutionary for the first time was super comedic, super heartfelt, and I think the action scene in the High Evolutionary's throne room was incredibly well done, and I just had an absolute blast witnessing that. On top of that, I think that pretty much all of the action in this film is well choreographed, well done, super engaging, and super enjoyable. Now, unfortunately, coming off a high note, easily this film's biggest disappointment is Adam Warlock. I have been waiting to see Adam Warlock for years, and I really like this guy, and it was a real shame that he wasn't in the Infinity War movies. Now, I don't want to talk bad about the actor. I do not remember his name off the top of my head, but I do know he played Gally in the Maze Runner trilogy. I really like him as an actor. I like a lot of the things he's in, and I think he does a good job himself with Adam Warlock. Just the script he was given and the way the film represents him feels very last minute and very disappointing, unfortunately. Now, I do want to talk about some of the Guardians and their ending and what I thought about it on a more individual scale. Drax has to be the best represented in this film, outside from Rocket, of course. I really enjoyed him in this film. His comedy is as great as always, and the scene with him talking to the children just before the climax was super heartfelt. I absolutely loved it, and I think he had the best ending of the Guardians here, with being a fatherly figure to these children since he unfortunately doesn't have his family anymore. Nebula was also really good in this film, and overall, I think Nebula has had a lot of great character development throughout the MCU. However, I feel like in this film, she just complained and fought with everyone a little bit too much, and towards the ending, it did start to get a little bit annoying. However, I think she also had just as great of an ending with Drax, wanting to be giving these kids a better childhood than she had, and maybe something like a motherly figure, but really just giving them, raising them properly as opposed to how she was raised. Star Lord was also another great individual in this film. I do feel like in the beginning he was a little bit too mean to everyone. However, I really, really liked the character arc of Peter Quill learning how to swim. Of course, that's metaphorically, not physically. Now, I do think his emotional moment at the end was just a little bit unnecessary, in my opinion. I don't necessarily dislike how it was done or represented. I just think that whole scene didn't really need to be there. I am interested to see how he will return to the MCU, though I will honestly admit that I'm not too excited because I actually really would have liked it if Star Lord's character arc and the character of Star Lord had ended here. Groot was another really good one in this film. I really like seeing the different representations of Groot throughout the three Guardian films, as well as the Infinity War films. And I liked him in this film. I like Groot. But I will say, this is my least favorite that Groot has been out of the three Guardian films. I just feel like he was a bit, nicer and more emotional in the first one, and he was a lot funnier in the second one. And he's not necessarily bad in this film. It just is the least that I've liked him. Mantis was hilarious throughout the whole film. I think that she brought a lot of comedy to the table, a lot of fantastic comedy from start to finish. However, I think that Mantis had the weakest ending of the Guardians. Um, she didn't necessarily need to still be a Guardian, but I think that she could have stayed on Nowhere to help the kids, or even just stayed on Nowhere to be with her friends. Um, but she makes the choice to go out on her own and live her life, and I can respect that. Gamora, in my opinion, was the weakest of the Guardians in this film. I think bringing her back in Endgame was a very foolish choice, and I just wasn't a huge fan of what her character brought to the table in this film. Now, I will say I do like her ending in this film quite a bit, and I really like and respect the choice to not have Star Lord and Gamora get back together. Or get together for the first time, I guess, technically. Now, Rocket was fantastic in this movie. And even though he is on the back seat for about two-thirds of this film, The flashback more than makes up for it, and I absolutely love his character arc and character development through the MCU. And like I said before, the scene with the animals in the climax was just wonderful and beautiful. Now, I forget the character's name, but I do believe he is James Gunn's brother. I quite liked him in this film. Despite his, pretty brief appearance, I really liked him, and I loved his climactic moment at the end with Yondu's sort of whistle needle. Absolutely wonderful. Overall, I thought Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a very, very good film. I loved it. I cried. I laughed. It's just as enjoyable as an experience as all of the other Guardian films. And I would absolutely recommend people to go see it, especially if you love the MCU, and especially if you are a massive Guardians of the Galaxy fan. This is 100% the film for you. That's going to be all for me today. Bye, guys.